revisiting pathological demand-avoidance profile of autism spectrum disorder and profound autism by Richard Woods at London South Bank University PhD student. So yeah, I do have some conflicts of interest. I'm not going to read them out because they should be pretty well known. A bit more perspective. So I'm diagnosed as autistic in 2012. I do meet Elizabeth Newson's PDA profile, but I'm not emotionally attached to it. I am no longer basing my identity on diagnostic categories. I am equally respecting divergent views and evidence on PDA to critically synthesize suitable interpretations of it. My PhD is investigating PDA as part of the Critical Autism Studies and Disability Studies group at LSBU. This is my interpretation of the PDA literature and PDA. Some others may disagree, and sometimes I'll be working with a kind of medical model discourse on this topic, but I'm doing that within kind of viewing them as social constructs. So it doesn't mean that I agree with kind of calling these things a disorder or people having deficits, because I do not. So just moving on. So briefly about this talk. So it should be a short one for me. So it should be between 15 and 20 minutes long. The topics being covered will be how profound autism and PDA profile of ASD are conceptualized. Then discussing a proposal to use co-occurring difficulties to create autism subtypes, such as PDA profile of ASD. I'll be referring to some proposed medical ontologies of PDA, because I've got a list of if they're associated with trauma or aversive childhood experiences. And then I'll be talking about some of the core problems with the suggestion, because it's really quite, I would say, potentially dangerous. But yeah, so about profound autism, it's primarily meant to be recognised in autistic people who have either have co-occurring intellectual disability and or language impairment. Some people have added kind of severe autism to that definition, but there is another more broader definition, which is this is proposed by the Autism Science Foundation. So, to include research on severe and challenging behaviours, including self-injury, aggression, and irritability, and research focused on children under the age of 8. So, this is quite. But the point I'm trying to point out is there's no real agreement on what profound autism is or how it looks. It's quite means different to different people. Its proponents would argue that autistic people who should be attributed with profound autism, they're meant to need 24 hours support, and they cannot advocate for themselves. So yeah, talking about kind of PDA profile of autism. So how it's meant to be represented within autism spectrum is that the autism spectrum has broadened to include PDA features. The PDA literature acknowledges that many PDA features are not autism features, but apparently autism has expanded to include it. So these features are meant to exist as a series of continua within the autistic population. At one end, you'll have basically classical, what they would call more straightforward autism. I would just call it mainly autism. And the other end, you'd have what is PDA profile of autism. I would call it co-occurring difficulties. But yet these continual features includes things like anxiety, avoidance of ordinary demands, kind of various criminal acts such as bullying, harassment, lying, stalking, fantasy and role play, impulsivity, obsessive behaviours focused on other people, a need for control or a drive for autonomy, rapid mood changes, reinforcement-based approaches, and socially strategically manipulative avoidance behaviours, and kind of like theory of mind. So the red arrows are meant to indicate where these issues are problematic or impaired, and green arrows is where they're less impaired or less problematic. You'll notice that PDA's got most of the more impaired ends of the continua. So please don't verify this diagram, because there is some problematic aspects, like suggesting that like ABA like that's applied behaviour analysis and positive behaviour support are effective with autistic people. Like, please don't suggest that. So yeah, Waizbard-Bartov et al. Have published a response to an article that IONOVAs had published, responding to their original article suggesting that profound autism should be created and co-occurring difficulties should be used to kind of make autism subgroups. So this is what specifically they said. They said, in Waizbard-Bartov et al. 2023, we argue that due to the high prevalence of co-occurring challenges among autistic individuals and the significant impact these challenges have on individuals' everyday lives, it is appropriate to consider including them as part of a formal classification system for autism severity. It is the nature of the diagnostic classifications to evolve over time as more information is collected and a better sense of the condition is reached. When more autistic individuals are diagnosed with co-occurring anxiety than not, should anxiety be considered a co-occurring condition or a fundamental part of having autism contribute to its severity level? Kind of question mark. Others have argued that motor dysfunction is also so common that it should be included among the core conditions of autism. Yeah, I will kind of touch upon this in a bit more detail. So what they're saying is, if you were to apply this logic to PDA, PDA profile of autism, they wouldn't view PDA to be a distinct thing. They would have it as kind of being autism plus a series of co-occurring difficulties. So they would have autism plus anxiety, ADHD features, features of oppositional defiant disorder, and features of like and/or trauma. Um, so yeah, it's not particularly um, so what that means is you can view people having like those co-occurring difficulties together, that they'd be quite severely impaired. So what they would do is they would form they kind of form the autism spectrum a bit like this. So on the x-axis you got intelligent quotient, and on the y-axis you have functioning, which is meant to be a measure for inverse support needs. So the green circle is mainly DSM-5 autism, and then you've got basically groupings of autistic people who, and some non-autistic people who basically would meet threshold for profound autism or given profound autism, and kind of pathological demand avoidance. So with profound autism meant to be with intellectual disability, that's at the lower end here, and meant to be the higher end with like pathological demand avoidance. And they're also meant to have like high support needs, hence why they're down here. Like, these are not verified this diagram. It's particularly problematic if that happens. So yeah, I actually think the suggestion of using co-occurring difficulties potentially with as a kind of to make kind of subtypes based on severity, it has some superficial merit, and the reason for that is that we know that most people who are attributed with a category from the DSM will have multiple categories assigned, and these categories will often unpredictably interact. So they can make some features more intense, while others other features less intense, and sometimes these categories can interact to produce novel features which can be more intense than the features originally associated with the categories that they've been attributed with. So we also know that this is borne out in autistic people, because we know that co-occurring difficulties that are seen in the autistic population tend to present slightly differently in autistic people compared to non-autistic people. So yeah, officially it kind of makes sense to do what they've suggested, but there is some big problems with this. So I'm going to talk about briefly how you can model autistic subgroups based on these severity levels. So I'm going to be using like PDA as an example to do that. So on the left-hand side of this table, you have the DSM-5 specifiers for oppositional defiant disorder. So you've got mild, which is when the features only present, they're only present impairment in one setting. And moderates when these features set in like two settings. By settings, I mean things like academic, occupational, social, or areas of daily living. and 3 or more settings would count as severe. So you can kind of map these thresholds out, and compare them to kind of other diagnostic thresholds in the PDA literature or in clinical literature. So, for example, for ADHD, the features must be seen in at least 2 settings, but also they also need to be seen in social settings as well. For autism, these difficulties must be seen in them must cause significant impairment in like social, occupational, or other important settings. That's like at least 3. So it must be like seen as pervasive. Um, so yeah, this is helpful psychology PDA ones. So they're trying to split PDA into 2 categories. So what they would call rational demand avoidance, which is when the features are seen in at least one setting, primarily education. Um, I'd say this is not universally accepted because people who advocate for rational demand avoidance, which would be people like myself or Damien Milton, we would view this split to be arbitrary. So, but if you accept help psychology's view on when something's like PDA, they would say that the features have to be seen in at least 3 settings, so like equivalent to kind of autism. If you look at like the settings for obsessive compulsive disorder, they must be time consuming for at least 1 hour a day, and cause significant impairment or distress in at least one setting. And again, for obsessive defiant disorder, these features must cause distress or impairment in at least one setting. But it can also be they can also cause distress in other people. And this is a transactional stress model, which is you view the demand avoidance as being causing distress and or impairment in at least one setting, such as school, social life at home. And obviously, the more distressed and or stressed a person is, the more settings they will express demand avoidance features in. Um, so, yeah, this diagram is basically just more of an example on this. So it's a continuum of kind of like avoidance of auditory demands and like to kind of like to compliance to auditory demands. So the number of kind of settings in which these demand avoidance or compliance demands is kind of expressed in, the more you can kind of go. If it's 1, it's like mild. If it's CD2, more like moderate. 3 or more, you can view it as being severe. And it's the same again with the kind of hyper compliance one. I must point out, please do not verify this diagram. It's kind of a bit problematic. It's there just to aid discussion. So yeah, because some people would point out that like compliance demands is part of demand avoidance, but we'll just kind of the purpose of this diagram in this slide is primarily to show that you can um, you can try and model autism severity with the curricular difficulties quite easily with yeah, basically using the PDA as an example. Yeah, I do have some major problems with this suggestion by Waizbard-Bartov et al. To use curricular difficulties to create autism subtypes based on severity. So I'm going to read out. I'm going to read out this quote because it should explain that basically the categories in DSM are not designed to they're not designed to map large sections of people's spiky profiles or to be kind of lumped arbitrarily together to make categories like profound autism or PDA. So yeah, the quote is so. However, curricular difficulties should already be accounted for during autism diagnostic assessments, as the diagnosis requires alternative explanations to be dismissed. Diagnostic categories, as described within the American Psychiatric Diagnostic Manual in brackets DSM-5, are not designed to map large sections of a person's spiky profile. With residual categories commonly diagnosed, often pertinent parts of a person's spiky profile are missed during assessments. Consequently, the DSM-5 contains a section for cross-categorical tools, and it is common to have multiple diagnoses. Frequently, the differences between diagnostic categories are arbitrary, with clinicians' bias affecting what a person is diagnosed with, such as through diagnostic substitution. So, yeah, I can move on with other problems. The next 2 slides are a table showing some hypothesized medical ontologies for PDA. This is from a blog post that I wrote like about 3.5 years ago, but it's interesting, relevant here because it gives. What I'm interested in is the right-hand column showing, indicating if this category or difficulty is associated with either trauma or childhood childhood aversive experiences. So the first one is like just autistic trauma. Well, that's self-evident, yes. And the next one is PD as a form of attachment disorder. Again, yes, associated with trauma and or aversive childhood experiences. Form of catatonia, that's again yes. Next one, PD as a form of personality disorder. The answer is yes, it can be caused by trauma, such as borderline personality disorder. So PDA could be symptoms of autism anxiety. Again, yes, it could be associated with trauma and or aversive childhood experiences. Symptoms of PDA could be symptoms of autism and anxiety disorders. Again, yes, could be associated with kind of childhood trauma or aversive childhood experiences. The final one is ADHD, and the answer is again yes, it can be, because ADHD can be linked with environmental factors associated with with parental interactions. So on the next slide, this is a continuation table. So this could be like PDA could be symptoms of autism, bipolar disorder, and again, like yes, bipolar disorders can be associated with trauma and ACE, and again, like autism and depression, and the answer is yes. And like PDA could be like symptoms of autism and destructive impulse control and conduct disorders. So that's oppositional fight and conduct disorders, what I'm mainly including there. So conduct disorder is linked to environmental factors associated to kind of parental interactions. So that's again yes. Symptoms of autism, eating disorders, again is linked to trauma and or aversive childhood experiences. Again, with symptoms of autism and obsessive compulsive disorder, the answer is yes, it is associated with trauma and or aversive childhood experiences. And so the final two proposed hypotheses in the table of what PIDA could be, which is symptoms of autism and schizophrenia and symptoms of autism and bipolar disorder. So, so that's carried over. Ignore that because I didn't crop the bottom row. So yeah, the reason why I'm doing this is because many co-occurring difficulties that autistic people have are associated with trauma and or aversive childhood experiences. And again, like many co-occurring difficulties are transactional with the environment, such as demand avoidance. So what this means is if you're using co-occurring difficulties to create subtypes of autistic people based on severity, it means that it risks kind of rooting these co-occurring difficulties to the individual and not taking into account environmental factors which cause most or many of these co-occurring difficulties in autistic people. So as an example, like anxiety in autistic people is either due to kind of the present situation the person's in or what has been done to them, or what's been done to us autistic people. So yeah, it's a bit concerning already. There's other issues involved with it as well, which kind of make using co-occurring difficulties to create autism subtypes problematic. So, for what if it risks kind of with rooting difficulties back into the individual, it can easily lead to abuse because it means that it's easier for other people to ignore the action. It can lead to it being easier for people to ignore the consequence of their actions on autistic people. So that means it can be easier to lead to abuse. It also blurs the line blurs lines of our understanding of autism. So it risks, for example, appending the consensus that autism is something that's intrinsic to the individual. Because, so for example, right, it suggests that autistic people can be cured, which there's no cure for autism. Like autism cannot be cured. You can so for example, right, if an autistic person has an eating disorder and they granted a subtype based on the impairment of their eating disorder, if one recovers from their eating disorder, the logic could be used that, well, if you can recover from your eating disorder, you can therefore recover from your autism. Another way of putting it is if your co-occurring obsessive compulsive disorder was caused by trauma, then that also kind of suggests that your autism may also be caused by trauma because you're associating your severity level based on these impairments. So we also know that the autistic population generally is in great distress because we're generally not supported very well. Like, how autistic populations are treated by broader society and culture is generally atrocious. So, um, when you kind of have these problems together with, along with like issues such as diagnostic overshadowing, where people can mistakenly attribute features of like physical health conditions to autism, for example, that it's ethically problematic to um, to use co-occurring difficulties to create autism subtypes based on even if it's just on severity. Um, so I'm gonna kind of point out more broadly how problematic it is by reading out this final paragraph from this recent article that I had published with others. So yeah, autism subgroups are controversial because autistic persons as a population are suffering greatly due to lack of sufficient support. Autism itself cannot be successfully divided into subgroups. The differences between subgroups in studies often result from the use of circular methods. This is highlighted due to the use of co-occurring difficulties to create profound autism. Waizbard-Bartov et al. Have added severe autism to the term, underscoring there is no consensus over what profound autism is. There is resistance against profound autism, and its utility remains undemonstrated. Catherine Nord observed the same issues with PDA. The concerns about PDA's risk to the validity of established clinical language, turning nosology on its head, and its potential for research of clinical confusion can be applied to profound autism. Profound autism is viewed by many autistic persons to be representing over a 30-year step backwards. It would not be sufficient to guide service delivery exactly as functioning levels never were. Following PDA's commodification of autistic self-agency benefiting insurance interests, we ask who predictably benefits from profound autism, especially financially. So, yeah, this is getting to the end of the video. So, these are contact details, Twitter handle, like ResearchGate link, which you can find my research at, and obviously links to YouTube channel, which you should know because just where the video is. There's only 3 reference slides, so I'm not gonna read them out or linger on them too long because you can pause the video to read them. So, onto the second reference slide. Um, so yeah. So thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video informative. Anyway, bye.